All right. So we have today we have Daniel Evans. He is the CEO of the Birmingham Enterprise Community and also leads the Forward Accelerator program in the United Kingdom. So this is our first guest that is international. So Rebel One Live is going global. Thank you for joining us today in our founder and investor series. So thank you, Evans. Daniel.
No, that's awesome. Good honor to be the first kind of international guest on the series. So that's
Yeah,
really cool.
absolutely. So I know today a number of people, um, in going global and looking at everything that's happening, especially now in the current climate. Um, I wanted to highlight Daniel partly because he's done great work setting up an accelerator program outside of a traditional ecosystem, which is part of we talk about Rebel One economic empowerment and really developing entrepreneurial communities everywhere. And glad to hear, looking forward to hear more about how you're doing that outside of the London ecosystem in Europe. If we could share a little bit more about your background, I know you work with FWD Ventures out in London. You've been involved with organizing several TEDx and really leading the accelerator over there and starting it up. Can you share a little bit more about your background if I haven't covered it?
Sure. So I guess to begin right at the start, I was somebody that took a long time to figure out exactly what it was I wanted to do. My family are funeral directors. So kind of the traditional path for a lot of people in my family is to go into that industry, to work for the family business. Did that for a few years after my kind of initial education. Enjoyed it, really rewarding industry to work in, taking care of families at a really difficult time in their lives. But knew that long term I wanted to do something for myself and set something in myself up. I kind of grew up with my granddad who had set up the business. My uncles had set up their own businesses. So I thought I want to set something up on my own. Went to university, did business management at undergrad, did a master's in entrepreneurship then at Aston University. After that, used that time to really figure out what it is I wanted to do. That started by first trying to find other people that wanted to set up businesses. So I thought if I can meet with them, see what they're doing, see how they're going about coming up with an idea, how they're setting up businesses, something will come. I'll figure something out then.
And this was all in Birmingham?
This was in Birmingham, yeah. So originally at a university called Newman University. So out of Birmingham's 5 universities, Newman is the smallest university. Traditionally, it was a teacher training college. So massive presence of people wanting to be teachers, wanting to work in communities, do social work, small kind of business department, which meant that there wasn't that many people wanting to set up businesses. So when I was going out and trying to find those people, there was no one there. I would say, come and let's talk about setting up businesses, and they'd say, well, I want to be a teacher, so not interested. So I was kind of putting on small events, putting on workshops, and finding that there was like 2-3 people in the room, and thought this isn't what I want. I need kind of to build a bigger community. So it was at that point that I started to reach out to other people that were doing similar things in Birmingham. People who were maybe leading student societies like I was, people who were running kind of meetup groups in the city, and said to them, why don't we work together? Why don't we do collaborative events, share resources, rather than me having 5 people, you having 5 people, the other group having 5 people, bring these groups together and have a kind of bigger massive community. What I then found is that over the course of most of 2018, snowballed into its own entity in itself. As we kind of brought more people in, got more people involved, it took on its own kind of presence. And that's what essentially became Birmingham Enterprise Community.
Got it. And for you, what was the draw in developing this community in Birmingham versus London, right? Which is a financial epicenter in the UK.
I think for me, I mean, I grew up around Birmingham, so it's kind of my city. I think it's it's just a different kind of vibe, a different culture to London. Um, as you said, a lot kind of less developed. But I felt that the opportunities to make something happen here were far greater than London. If I went to London and tried to do something like this, it would be kind of swallowed up with everything going on. Whereas here, very quickly, Birmingham's the second biggest city in the UK. But the business community itself is quite small. It doesn't take you to connect to many people to be able to work your way across the whole city.
And for people that aren't familiar with Birmingham, what would you say is the unique competitive advantage of the ecosystem, or like the unique industry that is in Birmingham?
Sure, I'd say traditionally it was always manufacturing. So at one time, the kind of height of the first industrial revolution, Birmingham was like the kind of a manufacturing powerhouse. It would create goods that are sold out throughout the whole world. Obviously, moving more into the last century and things being offshored, that went away. So for a long time, Birmingham really struggled to know what it was all about. It had lost this identity as a manufacturer. It did a few different things, but nothing really well. That's now changing. So we're now trying to figure out what the city is known for. The city that was once called City of a Thousand Trades is now slowly picking up pace in different sectors. So fintech is growing in Birmingham. HSBC, one of the largest, obviously, banks in the world, they at the end of last year moved their UK headquarters from London into Birmingham. Medtech and life sciences. So we have some world-leading universities in terms of University of Birmingham and the research that they put out. The Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham, again, is a pioneering teaching hospital. A lot of first happened around those sites. So I think it's slowly picking up pace in several industries.
Okay, great. And part of the reason I wanted to highlight Birmingham for those watching is in the US, there's a number of cities that have the same story, right? Manufacturing epicenters, things shifted, and then thinking about what's their unique competitive advantage. And it has been happening, and I think especially now in the time of COVID, with people working more remotely, I think where people are thinking more and more, why don't I move somewhere that's less expensive? Part of galvanizing ecosystems there, I think that is going to be just more of a constant. So can you share a little bit more about what you feel the role? I mean, you alluded to it right now, but you have Birmingham that they're manufacturing and like lower costs of being in London. What do you see the relationship between like Birmingham as its own entity and London?
I think one of the big things, I guess, Birmingham has going for it at the moment is the fact that it is literally in the center of the UK. So you are, not far from London. You're not far from the likes of Manchester and Leeds and a lot of the other major cities in the UK. So as you said, with what's going on at the moment, we've discovered that location isn't what we thought it was. So you don't have to be in the same location as your customers, your clients, investors. You can quickly move city to city and do all that stuff. So I think with Birmingham then, it's a case of, because it is so central, you can access all these other areas and other cities so easily.
Okay.
Now, I was going to say, in terms of its relationship with London, it's a weird one, because I guess we don't necessarily see London as something we can keep up with. London has its own kind of momentum, its own thing going. sometimes a lot of the conversations are more about how we compare with other cities in the UK.
Okay, got it. But do you see yourself, and maybe I'm, seeding it, but do you see yourself as a place for like more startups can start there? It's lower cost
Yeah.
to start and go for a longer period of time, and then once they get moving, they could go to London. Is that um, London? I feel was probably still an epicenter for
Yes. Yes.
investment, right?
Well,
And
I guess with us though, we see that you can set up here completely right in terms of whether it's the cost of living. If you're renting a house here, it's far cheaper than London. If you're renting office space, if you're paying developers, far cheaper here than if you're doing it in London. So that capital lasts a lot longer. Um, However, as I said, because of the location, you're so close to London that you can still be here in Birmingham and interact with everything that's going on in London and draw benefit from the different resources that London has to provide.
got it. Can you share a little bit more at a higher level what the impact that Brexit has had on on um, on innovation in the UK and what you see it have the impact you see it having going forward?
John, this is so interesting because obviously for the past few years it's been in this country Brexit, everything about Brexit and what Brexit gonna do. All of a sudden that's been put to one side, like, with everything was going on with COVID. It's meant that that's kind of almost been forgotten about. It's been a long time since I've heard somebody mention Brexit. But again, it's something that we're going to have to pick up at some point. I guess what we're trying to understand at the moment is still what that relationship with Europe will look like in the long term. We have this deal that's in place and this transition period, but we still don't know really what that relationship is long term. We're looking at, okay, how do we engage with the rest of the world? And I think on the basis of whether it's over with the States, with some of the countries over in Asia, there's been a lot of talk, especially here in Birmingham, about strengthening relationships with countries like China. So I think as far as the rest of the world goes, we're open for business, and I think it only draws our attention to those other relationships and what's possible there.
Got it. And then shifting over to what you mentioned before, you talked about COVID and the impact. What are you seeing is the impact of COVID on the startup community in the UK?
So I think you've kind of got multiple responses by different businesses. Those that have kind of just got on with it. So they thought, okay, we know what we can't do. We know where there's disruption. Let's focus on the things that we can do. Let's reassess where we're at as a business and use this as an opportunity to review and take stock of what we're doing. There's been others that have shifted their attention to helping with COVID and what's going on. So they've been saying, okay, how can we use the technology that we've already developed in this new context? A lot of innovation funding has popped up in the UK for people doing just that. I guess one of the issues has been is that people have ideas, people have potential solutions to problems, but getting them to the government and getting the government to take notice has been really difficult. Even with the government setting up, official channels to send in what you're working on, that's been really difficult. You've had some businesses who have honestly said, we don't know if we're going to survive this. We don't know if we're going to be able to trade through this and keep going. So a mixture of responses from the businesses, although in general, I think we've seen positive signs that life is still going on. So there's obviously been businesses that are still able to close deals. We've seen, several businesses, even here in the Midlands, that have closed deals within the past couple of weeks. So they're still able to get investment. Some of the VCs and private equity firms in this region have said, we're still looking, we're open to doing deals. And then I guess the final thing on that front is obviously the government here, the government where you are, has looked to step in on how it can help business. What funds can it provide to help businesses get through this current crisis? In the UK, we've obviously seen a mixture of grant funding, of debt financing to help businesses through. A lot of it, though, has been aimed at around established businesses. There was an open letter that was signed by a lot of organisations in the UK to the Prime Minister in the country under this kind of title, Save Our Startups. There's a big fear that a whole generation of startups could be lost unless the government actually steps in and helps to support those startups.
Got it.
Yeah, but I guess then there's some people that lie on the other side in terms of, okay, the problem is with kind of bailing out those startups or pumping money into them is if you try to help them all and help the weak ones, is that a good use of taxpayers' money, or actually should you use this as a process of a natural cleansing that the kind of strong ones survive and that the weaker ones go?
And that leads me to, and I mean, what's your position on that in terms of developing? You have your own accelerator. What do you think? What do you think needs to happen, or is happening that's good, and what would you change in that regard?
So it's interesting. I think there's a lot of businesses who are now seeking, so saying, okay, we need funding. I need to be able to pay myself. I need to be able to pay employees or different costs, who may not have had that money in the next couple of months. So all of a sudden they kind of want money to be there when, even if this didn't happen, they wouldn't have had investment in, they're not making revenue. So it hasn't impacted him on that front. It's really difficult. It's so difficult because I can see both sides of the equation, really. There are a lot of really talented entrepreneurs, a lot of really kind of interesting businesses coming through who could genuinely be, disadvantaged because of this situation, and without it would have kind of gone on it to do something. But it's how you classify those ones and how you decide, okay, these ones are the ones worth saving, these ones aren't. And I think that's such a tough decision to make.
Yep. Can you share more, shifting gears to the Forward Accelerator, and what can you share? What is the Forward Accelerator and what you all do?
Sure. So Forward Accelerator is, funnily enough, an accelerator program that helps early stage ventures here in the Midlands. So not predominantly focused on startups that have come from the Midlands. The startups can come from anywhere. On the next cohort, we have a startup joining us from Italy. We have a startup joining us from Costa Rica. But it's about bringing them to the Midlands and attracting talented entrepreneurs here to the Midlands. For obviously context, Birmingham is within Midlands, which is the region of the UK that we're in. It's a 6-month program, all the kind of traditional elements of support, but really backed up by this strong community that Birmingham Enterprise Community has pulled around it, which means that we can draw on partners both locally, nationally, and even internationally. We have mentors such as yourself, Sergio, who kind of bring an international perspective to the people on the accelerator. So just, to give them all the support that they can, traditionally around building solid foundations from which they can then scale from in the future. However, we're currently going under a transition where we're shifting that more towards that scale-up stage. So over the next kind of 12 months, we'll see the Forward Accelerator shift its focus onto scale-ups, with earlier interventions coming in to help that pipeline of startups coming through.
Are you offering? Are you shifting focus of the accelerator in general, or is this a new program to focus on scale-ups and with an existing program focusing on more early stage?
So new program to focus on the early stage, with the current Forward program obviously shifting later stage. With it, obviously there needs to be adaptations to suit that stage. But we've been it'll be no secret to people in Birmingham that we've been looking to raise a fund to kind of back that accelerator and the startups coming on that program. And we just sort of, in terms of the most impact, that's where that needs to be. Birmingham suffered for a long time in that for the number of new startups, it kind of leads the way. So last year, per capita, Birmingham had more startups than even London per capita. However, when it comes to number of scale-ups, we dropped to about 7th in the UK. We've always kind of struggled for those businesses to make that transition to scale. Whereas, cities that are kind of much smaller than us are pumping out those numbers of scale-ups.
Got it. So to compare to other cities, are they not scaling up, or are they moving to other cities to scale?
Yeah, that's interesting. Traditionally, a lot of them would move. So we have them to move to London. We have had a couple of businesses who have moved out to the States. So I think the businesses are there. It's just that they get to a certain stage and then they're like, okay, to progress, the support I need is not here. The ecosystem hasn't developed that part yet. So we really see pushing forward to a later stage as part of helping that ecosystem to have the right support to allow the scale-ups to stay here and grow here.
Got it. So great, helping the ecosystem. And in your opinion, what is that? Taking a step back and saying, is that the natural role of I would say these rise of the rest cities, right? In the U.S., using the phrase by the Revolution Ventures and Stephen Chase's organization, Rise of the Rest. He talks about these cities that may not be the primary ecosystems, but they are embryonic, and then the startups end up moving to the more mature ecosystems. And then there's people like you. I think the same thing happens in the U.S. when you talk about other cities such as the Miami ecosystem, the Austin ecosystem, the Chicago, St. Louis, and so forth, that are developing their own. In the same way Birmingham is to London. Do you believe that? Do you believe that those cities like yours are like kind of owning it as this is the place to start, or that hey, you can start here, stay here, and grow? What role do you, what role do you believe those the types of cities like yours should and do play?
I think currently we're not playing that role. Currently we are feeding other parts of the world, but I don't think that's what we want to do. Really, I think we kind of sit and discuss this a lot with other programs in the city, other elements of the ecosystem, but we want these guys to stay here. And when we speak to the startups themselves, they want to stay here. They love Birmingham as a city. There's a lot going on culturally in the city. And this is meant as no offense to London, but kind of when people come and they come up from London and experience things in Birmingham, they say, wow, like the community here is like nicer than what's going on in London. People want to know what you're doing. They want to hear about the progress that you're making. There's just that more cohesive feel. So if they want to stay here, we need to make it so that there's the right support that they can stay here. And as we know, then if we can keep those scale-ups here, the economic impact that has in the area then is absolutely huge in terms of creating jobs, bringing investment here. Hopefully as well, working closely with people like the local government, using that as a mechanism to lift the whole region, not just the city centre or the kind of areas where the money sits, but those outer rings of the city as well.
And what do you believe some of those elements are to enable scale-ups to stay?
Sure. I think so. We have an organisation in the UK called Tech Nation. So they keep a close monitor on the state of tech for the whole UK. And consistently in their last couple of annual reports, the big three problems that startups report in Birmingham that they think is I guess stopping them from scaling is access to talent, access to finance, and access to the right mentors. I think access to talent, we see that it's not necessarily that there isn't talent in the city. So we have, 5 universities in the city. So a lot of talent coming out of them. We have awesome organizations like the School of Code who, help train developer talent within the region. So the talent's there, it's connecting the startups and the talent. Sometimes you go to, say, networking events, and there's a lot of entrepreneurs there, a lot of people running businesses, but not necessarily the developer talent. If you then go to, some of the tech meetups, all the developer talent kind of sits on its own and is like out the way. So it's just bringing them together is I guess the issue there. From a finance point of view, yes, traditionally, obviously, there's a lot more going on in London. There's been some programs like Midlands Engine Investment Fund who have tried to bring more money to the city. I guess traditionally there was notions about location as well, and that you have to be in a certain location for people to invest in you. But again, I think, go on.
And you all aren't that far via train from London either way. So
see,
yeah.
like what you can be in London in an hour and a half, which in the States I know is nothing. Like if you travel an hour and a half, that's nothing. Here, for some reason, an hour and a half is like, a mission to travel that far. I honestly don't know why that is.
That's the perception, yeah.
Yeah, we're obviously, a lot of people are hoping. We've got a major infrastructure project, HS2 it's called, so High Speed Rail 2, which is building a high-speed line between London and Birmingham. Shaves about 30 minutes off the commute time, and they're hoping that will help to aid that transition of people and some of the money in London up to the Midlands and Birmingham.
And can you share? No, that's great. I especially in terms of development. So a lot of parallels to the U.S. in terms of the rise of the rest cities. I'll call them, and no, I appreciate you sharing that story. I wanted to shift back to some of your entrepreneurs. Are there any that in light of COVID and the challenges happening right now, do you want to highlight any work that they're doing to alleviate the challenges that we have?
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, there's been a few that have looked at what they do and have said, okay, can we apply this in a different context? For example, we've got one business that work in the construction industry. They had a think in terms of what they do in terms of helping people to bring together talent resources, whether that could be applied in a different context. I guess one of the big ones to highlight is a company that we have called Skyfarer. So Skyfarer is a company that helps to deliver medical and nutritional supplies in areas of challenging infrastructure. So they used drones and UAVs to deliver resources. Predominantly have been looking to trial the technology in Africa, but with everything going on and the need for social distancing and that kind of thing, all of a sudden that becomes relevant even here in the UK. Is can you deliver supplies without having to have humans to go and actually deliver them? So I know those guys are looking at what they can do and how they can get involved with what's currently going on. As I said, the big problem at the moment is there's a lot of people with a lot of ideas going to the government, going to the money that's there for these, and it's how you then pick out the best ones.
Yeah, great. I wanted to close. I know we're coming on the half hour. If you can share for people that are outside of their major ecosystem cities, any words of advice on how to get started, on how to build the startup community in those cities, such as you've done in Birmingham. What would you say to them?
I think we always use a term collaboration, not competition. So sometimes you see people that are doing things aimed at the same audience as you. So for us, it may be other accelerators or incubators. By actually saying, okay, we all have our own target niche in terms of the industry or the type that we target. How can we work together in a way that builds the whole ecosystem? Because collectively, if there's a bigger ecosystem, we all benefit from that. So putting that traditional notion of competition aside and actually working with people you may view as competitors to build the whole thing up together, I think is what we've always tried to do.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you very much, Daniel, for giving us insight into the Birmingham ecosystem and Forward Accelerator and the role they play. Excited to have a global startups now part of the Accelerator, and setting an example of how to stimulate the ecosystem beyond our traditional the traditional ecosystem and expand it forward. So thank you very much for the work you do and coming on today. And for everyone watching, again, this is our Founders and Investors series for Rebel One Live. Join us it's a Tuesday and Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern time in the US. We also interview on Thursdays at 10 a.m. In Eastern time as well. And again, all accelerating impact founders and highlighting impact investors in the space. So